The Battle of Ain Jalut, fought in the year 1260 Common Era in present-day Palestine, marked a defining moment in history. It was a critical battle that would determine the very survival of Islam against the fearsome Mongol army, who had already toppled the caliphate and cast a dark shadow of terror across the region. In this video, we shall delve into the epic tale of the brave Mamluks who stood tall in the face of this colossal threat and defied all odds to save the Ummah from its utter annihilation. But before we begin, we kindly ask you to consider showing your support for the channel by liking, sharing and subscribing. Additionally, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below, as this would boost us in the algorithm. Jazakallahu khairan. First, a little context. Just who were the Mamluks? In the early 13th century, the Ayyubid dynasty of Egypt was under the threat of the Crusaders. In response, they began to search for the most promising young boys to recruit in their ranks, with the intention of creating a new super elite force. These boys, who would become known as Mamluks, were taken from their homes in the Caucasus region and Central Asia and then sent to Egypt to be trained in the arts of war. On this process, the historian Said Ashur writes, the Mamluk was taught a certain type of discipline, education, upbringing, and training so that he would learn the teachings and manners of Islam, and he would grow up not knowing any religion other than Islam. When the Mamluk reached the stage of youth, his master trained him in horsemanship, the use of a spear, and the sword, so that he would become a strong knight who could defend his master and himself when needed. While the historian Shafiq Jasser Ahmed Mahmud writes, the Ayyubid sultans and later the Mamluk sultans were concerned with raising their Mamluks in a special way, educating and teaching them the arts of war and combat, and they allocated military barracks in the citadel for this purpose. To give you an example of how intense the training had been, one source claims that they were expected to hit a 95 centimeter target at a range of 75 meters and to loose 3 arrows in 1.5 seconds. For years, these young boys continued to be raised in barracks and trained in ways of Islamic law and military tactics. They learned Arabic, Islamic jurisprudence, and military strategy, while bred to be warriors and taught to fight with the latest weaponry and technology of the time. This process was intensified under the reign of the Ayyubid Sultan, As-Salih Najmuddin Ayyub, and the Mamluks became the elite faction of the Ayyubid army. The process and training would pay off as the Mamluk army faced the Seventh Crusade. In 1250 Common Era, at the battles of Al-Mansura and Fariscour, they crushed the armies of Louis IX of France. And in the Battle of Fariscour, they captured the king himself. These victories made the Mamluks the most feared army in the region, and they soon took control of Egypt and formed their own dynasty. But their triumphs were short-lived, for a far greater enemy was looming on the horizon. In the 13th century, the Mongol Empire, led by the infamous Genghis Khan, swept through Asia with a fierce and ruthless force, leaving a trail of destruction and death in their wake. And by the mid-13th century, the Mongols posed as a severe threat to the Islamic Ummah. Hulagu Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, targeted the Islamic world, and one of his intended targets was Baghdad, the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate. It's worth noting that although the Caliphate existed, it had been a while since it had done anything significant. When the Mongols attacked the Caliphate, the Abbasid Caliph downplayed the threat and failed to respond appropriately. However, he would soon face a rude awakening. As written by the great scholar of Tafsir, Ibn al-Kathir writes, "The Tatars surrounded the Caliphate's palace, attacking it from all sides, until a slave girl who was playing with the Caliph and making him laugh, and who was one of his favorites, was hit by an arrow and killed while dancing in front of him. The Caliph was deeply disturbed by this and was extremely alarmed. He brought the arrow that had struck her between his hands and found a message written on it, which wrote, 'When Allah wills to fulfill his decree and destiny against the doomed civilization, he takes away the minds of those who had them.'" We need to understand something here. The Mongols weren't mere barbarians. They studied the culture and religious beliefs of their enemies really well, which made them even more intimidating. Baghdad would fall in February 1258 Common Era. The city was sacked and burned to the ground, leading to the massacre of innocent civilians and the destruction of irreplaceable treasures. The Mongols' disregard for culture and traditions of the conquered lands only fueled their bloodlust. As described by al-Dhahabi, they eliminated its judges, jurists, and scholars, not to mention its majesty and multitude, and they destroyed its schools and mosques and tied up its wells. They made their vast treasuries and libraries a feast for the fire. Ibn Kathir adds, their entry into Baghdad was in the latter part of Muharram, and the sword continued to kill its people for 40 days. The exact number of casualties remain unknown, but Ibn Kathir estimates anywhere from 800,000 to 2 million people. As the year 1260 Common Era approached, the Mongols' swift conquests and brutal tactics posed a severe threat to the existence of Islam, causing fear among many Muslims. They now controlled much of Levant, including Damascus and Aleppo. The latter suffered a similar fate to Baghdad. And with the Abbasid Caliphate now fallen, the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt was now the only powerful bastion of Islam left to defend them against the Mongol invasion, and the clash between the two forces was now inevitable. However, unknowingly to the Mongols, they were about to meet their match, as soon they would be up against two of the greatest military generals of their generation. The first was Qutuz, a man of exceptional character who would earn the title Saif, and he would become the face of the counter-Mongol movement. Born as Mahmud bin Mahmud into the illustrious Khwarezmian dynasty, Qutuz was forced to flee his homeland when the Mongols swept through Central Asia. After a harrowing journey, he found himself in Damascus. In a moment that would change the course of history, as a young boy, Qutuz revealed a ru'ya to his teacher during his Islamic studies. "I will give you Egypt and its treasure, and I will break the Tatars," he proclaimed with absolute conviction. His teacher, unable to comprehend the audacity of this young boy, would respond, "Are you crazy?" But Qutuz stood firm and said, "I saw the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, in a dream, and he told me that you would possess the Egyptian lands and defeat the Tatars." It was a bold claim, one that defied all reason and logic. The Tatars were known to be invincible, and no one dared to stand up to them. Aside from what we've already mentioned above, to further exemplify this, Ibn al-Athir once reported, "A Tatar man entered a district that contained 100 men. He continued to kill them one by one until he eliminated them all. Nobody raised a finger to try to harm him. People were totally submissive and could not defend themselves to any extent whatsoever. We take refuge in Allah from such abasement." But Qutuz was different. He had a vision, a purpose, and strong faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This young boy dared to dream of the impossible, not just taking over Egypt, but also defeating the unconquerable. As if to fulfill the ru'ya, he would be sold off by a slave merchant to Cairo. While there, he would begin his Mamluk training program that we have already mentioned earlier. Through sheer determination and unwavering faith, he worked his way up the ranks of the Mamluk training and proved his mettle in battle, even against the 7th Crusade. And his big moment would come. In 1259 Common Era, Qutuz would become the Sultan of Egypt. It is unclear whether Qutuz remembered the dream or even the conversation he had with the Sheikh. However, when news arrived back in Damascus that Qutuz had become Sultan of Egypt, that very same Sheikh would remember the conversation, informing the soldiers nearby, "Yes, by Allah, he will take over the kingdom and defeat the Tatars." Quite remarkably, this man went from being a prince to a refugee to a slave and now a sultan, poised to make history and save the Ummah from the Mongol threat. However, he understood that in order to take on the Mongols, he needed all the help that he can get. Therefore, he turned to the other great general of the era. Ruqn-ud-Din Baybars was a military genius and commander of the Middle Ages, whose battlefielding skills surpassed all others. At the age of 14, he endured rigorous Mamluk training and served under the various masters before joining a Salih's Bahriya corps in 1246 Common Era. Like Qutuz, Baibars quickly rose through the ranks, earning admiration from his peers for his physical prowess and military expertise. Already, he played a critical role in the Seventh Crusade against King Louis, demonstrating unparalleled leadership and skills on the battlefield. However, tensions arose between Baibars and Qutuz, who belonged to rival Mamluk factions. As a result, Baibars was exiled to Levant. Nevertheless, when the Mongols posed a significant threat, Qutuz recognized the need for Baibars and his exceptional skills. Hence, he called upon him for his aid. Returning to the timeline of events, Qutuz kept himself informed about the situation in Levant and discovered that Hulagu had unexpectedly departed from the region. This was because Hulagu received news of the death of his older brother. Thus, he left his most exceptional general, Ketbuka, in charge of Mongol Syria. Albeit, the army was significantly reduced, but still a formidable force. When Qutuz learnt of this, he realized that this was the ideal moment to strike, and as if by perfect timing, a Mongol envoy arrived in Cairo shortly after. The Mongol envoy issued their usual threats to Qutuz and the emirs he had gathered. For the purpose of analysis, we will read the letter in two parts. Part 1 goes like this. From the King of the Kings, in the east and the west, the great Khan, in the name of Allah, who spread the earth and raised the heavens, know that the victorious King Qutuz, who is of the Mamluk people who fled from our swords to this region, enjoying his generosity and killing those who were in his power thereafter. King Qutuz knows that his commanders and the people of his kingdom are present in the Egyptian lands and their surroundings, and that we are the soldiers of Allah in his land, created from his wrath and empowered over those who provoke his anger. Therefore, all your lands should be obedient to us, and do not challenge our determination, and learn a lesson from others, and submit to us before the cover is revealed and you regret your mistake. We do not have mercy on those who cry, or sympathize with those who complain. You have heard that we have opened up the lands and purified the earth from the corruption and killed most of the people. So flee and seek refuge with us. Stopping to reflect, we can draw a few conclusions. Firstly, the Mongols' arrogance, and this is most evident in their self-proclaimed title of King of Kings, which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ warned against. Cited in Bukhari 6025, the Prophet ﷺ said, "The most awful name in Allah's sight on the day of resurrection will be that of a man calling himself Malik al-Amlak." Secondly, the Mongols utilized the phrase Bismillahum, in the name of Allah, followed by who spread the earth and raised the heavens. They even referred to themselves as the soldiers of Allah in his land, despite not being Muslims. As mentioned earlier, this demonstrates their effort to conduct thorough research on their enemy, to ensure effective communication and intimidation, and also their conviction in their divine right to conquer. Point 3. The Mongols aimed to deceive Qutuz by convincing him that it was he who was spreading corruption, while they were purifying the earth. Finally, the Mongols were aware of Qutuz's past, including their invasion of his homeland, and that he was forced to flee them. Part 2 goes like this. Which land will shelter you? Which path will save you? And which lands will protect you? None of our swords will spare you, and none of our fears will help you. Our horses are fast, our arrows are miraculous, our swords are thunderbolts, our hearts are like mountains, and our numbers are like sand. Your forts do not stop us, and your soldiers do not benefit you. Your reign will not help you, because you have consumed the prohibited, and are not forgiving when speaking, and you have betrayed the covenants and oaths, and rebellion and disobedience have spread among you. So rejoice in humiliation and disgrace, for today you will be punished for your arrogance in the land without justification and for your rebellion. Those who have done injustice will learn about their fate. Whoever seeks our war will regret, and whoever seeks our peace will have it. If you obey our terms and follow our orders, you will have what is ours, and you will have what is yours. If you oppose us, you will see what will happen to you. In this instance, the Mongols employed the threat of disgrace and humiliation. Furthermore, they were banking on Qutuz being ignorant of his own religion, accusing Qutuz of rebellion and attempting to deceive him into believing that submitting to them would lead to peace. In response to their demands, Qutuz chose to openly declare war on the Mongols by killing their messengers and displaying their severed heads, viewing it as a chance to display strength and exploit Hulagu's absence. The Mongols were furious by Qutuz's actions and began making preparations for the upcoming battle. On the 15th of Sha'ban, Qutuz gathered his men and the local rulers and inspired them with this following speech. O princes of the Muslims, you have been eating the wealth of the treasury for a long time, while you hate the invaders. As for me, I'm heading for jihad, so whoever chooses to join me, come, and whoever does not can return home. Indeed, Allah is watching, and the sin of the massacred Muslim women will be on the necks of those who lag behind. Next, the Sultan descended with his troops to Gaza and stayed there for a day. He then travelled along the coast to the city of Akka, where the Franks were present at the time, and asked them to be neutral, and swore to them that if any of them, whether a knight or a foot soldier, intended to harm the Muslim army, he would return and fight them before encountering the Tatars. As the Muslims came closer to the Mongols, he gave them one final speech. The chronicler al-Makrizi narrates its impact as the following. Qutuz ordered the princes to gather and urge them to fight against the Tatars, reminding them of the killing, enslavement, and looting that occurred to the people of the provinces, and warning them of the punishment of Allah. They wept and agreed to make every effort to fight the Tatars and drive them out of the country. The Sultan then ordered General Baibars to march with a group of soldiers until he met the Tatars' vanguard. Upon engaging them in combat, Baibars wrote back to Qutuz, informing him of this. In the meantime, he was advancing and retreating until the two armies reached the spring of Jalut, where the rest of the Mamluk army under Qutuz was hidden. It was then, on Friday, on the 25th day, during the last 10 days of the holy month of Ramadan, where the stage was set for a legendary battle that would decide the fate of Islam and the Ummah. On the 3rd of September 1260 Common Era, Baibars and Qutuz led their troops southeast down the Jaziril Valley to launch their attack. Both demonstrated exceptional courage and leadership skills, standing firm against two massive Mongol charges that could have easily broken their ranks. At one point, the tides of battle turned against the Mamluk army, and they were struggling against the relentless Mongol onslaught. But Qutuz was not one to give up easily. He took off his helmet and got into the thick of things, famously shouting, "Wa Islamah! Wa Islamah! Wa Islamah! O Islam!" 3 times, followed by, "O Allah, help your servant Qutuz against the Tatars." His valiant act galvanized the troops, and they fought on with renewed vigor. The Mamluks, trained to perfection, unleashed deadly long-range attacks from their stationary horses that rendered the Mongols' hit-and-run horse archery tactics useless. With the Mongols faltering, the Mamluks seized the opportunity and charged into the enemy ranks, led by Qutuz himself. Just when the Mamluks were gaining the upper hand, the unthinkable happened. The Mongol force was hit by the desertion, allowing the Mamluk right flank to break through the void and attack the Mongol center. Baibars would take advantage. His troops were able to break through the void and attack the Mongol center, and Qutuz would be captured and then killed. The Mongols were now leaderless and disoriented, and as a result began to flee. Against all odds, the Mamluks had defeated the Mongols, and the Ummah had new heroes.
لبناء جيل رائد بسلاحه علما وروحا للتقدم جاري لبناء جيل رائد بسلاحه.
Qutuz would then pray 2 rak'ah to give thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sadly, Qutuz, who would earn the title the Lion of Ain Jalut, would not live long after. Tensions would reignite between he and Baibars, and Qutuz would be assassinated by the Mamluk Bahriya faction. And according to the account of al-Makrizi, Baibars took part in the killing of Qutuz. In the aftermath, Baibars would become Sultan, and in his own right, he essentially transformed the Mamluks of Egypt into the major power in the region. And he was also the one who brought back the Abbasid Caliphate after the sack of Baghdad. And the Mamluks would go on to finish off the remainder Crusader states. Despite this, if al-Makrizi's account was true, then the murder of Qutuz would always leave a stain in the legacy of Baibars, for he had killed a great man and a champion of the Ummah. Final thoughts. The Battle of Ain Jalut is a remarkable achievement, and there is a lot we can learn from the legendary Qutuz. He was a visionary leader who recognized the threat posed by the Mongols and rallied his troops to stand up against them. Qutuz's unwavering faith and commitment to his people, as well as his cause, serves as an inspiration to leaders and individuals alike, and his legacy continues to be a source of inspiration to this day. Qutuz's life serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of courage, conviction, and faith in the face of adversity.
هم للطريق مشاعل الأنوار، هم للنسيم عبيره الفوار، هم قادة رفعوا التميز راية، هم في العزيمة همة الأنصار. هم للطريق مشاعل الأنوار، هم للنسيم عبيره الفوار، هم قادة رفعوا التميز راية، هم في العزيمة همة الأنصار. لبناء جيل رائد بسلاحه علما وروحا للتقدم جاري. لبناء جيل رائد بسلاحه علما وروحا للتقدم جاري. وبمنهج شرب الأصالة منهما ذاك الكتاب وسنة المختار. ذاك الكتاب وسنة المختار. للطريق مشاعل الأنوار، هم للنسيم عبيره الفوار، هم قادة رفعوا التميز راية، هم في العزيمة همة الأنصار. هم للطريق مشاعل الأنوار، هم للنسيم عبيره الفوار، هم قادة رفعوا التميز راية، هم في العزيمة همة الأنصار.